Welcome everybody to the February 8th, 2021 meeting for Van Wert City Council. We'll begin with the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would please stand. Lord Jesus, thank you for bringing everybody here tonight. Please be with everybody in this room, everybody watching online, everybody watching on the television. Help everybody to stay warm and stay safe in this difficult time for our country. Please give the individuals in this room wisdom and discernment as we work on the business for the city of Van Wert. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Drew, roll call.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Callis?
Here.
Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mr. Egler?
Here.
Mrs. Murgy?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
All right, everybody was presented the agenda for this evening's meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Motion to accept?
Motion to accept by Mrs. Murgy, second by Mr. Egler. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Was that yes?
That was here.
Yes. Just checking.
I wondered if anybody would see that.
As soon as I said, I'm like, oh boy. Makes you wonder if you're really here.
All right, everybody also, prior to this evening's meeting, was emailed copies of the minutes from our last meeting dated January 25th, 2020. That should be 2021. There's a typo on my copy and on the agenda. So that should be January 25th, 2021 minutes. Are there any additions or corrections other than the date typo on the minutes?
Motion to accept?
Motion to accept, Mrs. Murgy. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Second by Mr. Egler. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
All right, comments, communications, and petitions. I have a couple. Everybody should, I was emailed the 2020 annual report from Van Wert Municipal Court. The report is 15 pages long. I believe that email went out to all members of council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have not heard, the judge usually comes in to answer questions. I have not heard from the judge yet, but they may be busy with COVID regulations and that type of stuff. Also, I forwarded an email on February 5th that I received from Hall Block. It was an updated, a couple pages were updated in this document, so I forwarded that out. Specifically, the pages were 3 and 4. There were corrections to the statements of support. So, far and away, the rest of the document remained unchanged. The digital copy of pages 3 and 4 were updated. I received via email a letter from Van Wert Convention and Visitors Bureau, which I will give to Mr. Egler here in a second. Earlier, in a past meeting, we had talked about the monies that Van Wert Convention and Visitors Bureau gets from the Economic Development Fund here at the city. They get a certain percentage. What is it? 25%. They get 25% of whatever that the hotel motel tax brings in. Now, obviously, over the past year with COVID, they were negatively impacted. The other agencies that we support through that fund were not negatively impacted because they get a set dollar amount. The 25% is by statute, and we can't change that. But we had talked about passing along information to the Convention and Visitors Bureau and giving them the opportunity to ask us to consider making them whole for the year. So what this letter says, in short, They are requesting $11,368.03, which is the breakdown, which is the last 3 years, so 17, 18, and 19 average, less what they got in 2020. So they got, their average was, in 18 and 19, 49,000 and some change. They only got 36,000 in 2020. So I have all the numbers here. I'm going to pass this to Mr. Egler for his consideration coming out of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, John.
And finally, land transfer city to county. Is that one of the things you're going to talk about? Okay. That is all I have. Are there any comments, communications, or petitions from council members?
You got the letter we gave you?
The letter, yeah.
That's not,
That's different?
it's different. The de-annexation,
Yeah, John Brown Road?
yeah, you're not talking about
Okay.
Yeah, Stacy's not talking about that.
Oh, then I'm confused. Okay, I have a letter, I received a letter. Are you talking about this during your report?
Either one of us
that.
can.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I received a letter from Stephen and Erica Raxter related to a land transfer of city to county, and I will let whichever one of you wants to address that, you can address it right now.
Okay.
Or we can wait, it doesn't matter.
no, go ahead.
Mr. and Mrs. Raxter own 2 parcels on John Brown Road, contiguous to their home, which is not in the city.
Correct.
Just
Just north of the soccer field.
Just north of the soccer fields. They wish to have that property removed from the city and placed back into Pleasant Township. So kind of a de-annexation, but I guess the term we use is detachment. It's statutorily allowed. It's just kind of the opposite of what we do when we annex something in. The city has to pass an ordinance to allow the detachment. Then the property owners will still have to go to the county commissioners, and they'll still have to go to the Pleasant Township trustees, and everybody will have to be in agreement for that property to be placed back into Pleasant Township.
Okay. So I can give this letter to Mr. Davis,
Or
property and equipment.
I would probably be Joy, because it's,
Okay.
I would consider it more of an annexation
Okay.
procedure.
All right then. All right.
That's that.
That's that? Okay. Now, any comments, communications, petitions from council?
I got an email from a citizen in the Fourth Ward that wanted to pass on a thank you to the city crews for their efforts in plowing the streets, some of the side streets that I guess previously had been missed. Got to see a snowplow this time, so they were excited about that. They wanted to pass that on.
I'll pass that along.
They always miss my street.
Yeah.
I think it's on purpose. There's something to
Your
do with
alley.
me. It's my alley. Never gets it done. All right, we do have 2 groups or 2. Stacy Adam from Van Wert Economic Development. Go ahead, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, certainly appreciate it. I have 2 items today. First of all, wanted to let you know that Van Wert County would be applying for a CHIP grant coming up in May. That is the Community Housing Impact and Preservation Grant, and it's used for the rehabilitation of single-family homes for low to moderate income residents. The application for the grant is $10,000. That is outsourced to Pogemeyer. And in the past, there has been an agreement between the city and the county that if the grant is not approved, then the expense for the grant is shared between the city and the county. If the grant is approved, then the cost of the application can be reimbursed through the administrative costs that are allowed through the grant. So there is a partnership agreement that has been sent by the county. Actually, I am presenting that because we manage grants on behalf of the county out of our office now. So we are asking that the city council approve the ability to enter into that partnership agreement agreeing to share the cost, but again, only if it is not awarded. Since, I think at one point, Martha, the city may have applied for that from the city. Since it has gone to the county, so in the last 3 cycles, they're awarded once every 2 years. They have been awarded each of the last 3 times, so over the last 6 years. The last award was $700,000, and there were about 23 homeowners that would have used those funds.
Yeah.
So that's it for that piece.
So, have you provided the law director with the language?
I believe Krista has sent the draft partnership agreement to you,
To me?
yes. But I can,
I think I'd go back to 2018 or 2019 and probably look at the ordinance that because we would have passed an ordinance
Yeah.
2 years ago.
When?
it's done.
And that wouldn't be don't need to be on an emergency, does it? I can bring that, I
No,
can make
it
that
does
motion
not.
now, and he can,
Because I could prep it, we can pass it on the 22nd. I don't have to-
We won't submit,
Okay.
we won't submit until May. We will engage them prior to that, but I think
I
that would be
may
perfectly fine.
need Krista to check the email that she's sending stuff to me,
Yes.
because I don't remember
And
getting
if I
an email
have it
from
right
her.
here, I probably have it on my phone when I get 1
Okay.
second. and I'll pull
I
it.
don't have an email unless I'm looking where it's not.
Okay.
So actually,
I'll make that
I have a
motion
motion.
that we'll pay half that if, in the event that we don't get the grant. And have the law director handle that.
Okay, it needs to be on an emergency so we can pass it.
No, she said.
No?
It
Did I
really-
miss it?
it
Doesn't?
really doesn't.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Egler to prepare the necessary language, second by Mr. Callis. Any questions, concerns? Drew?
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Morgie?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
My second item, I'm going to start by just talking about some background. The city currently owns about 65 acres in Vision Industrial Park. We have seen a preliminary flood map, and all of the city-owned property will be negatively impacted by the revisions on the map. Jay Fleming has actually talked to Choice One Engineering and got an estimate for the mitigation on Maddox Creek to resolve that, and that cost is $250,000. Hold that piece. Now we're going to talk about another program. Jobs Ohio rolled out an OSIP program, Ohio Site Inventory Program, and it's really a combination of grant and loan funding, and it was used to increase the inventory for property and buildings that are available for industrial use throughout Ohio. The city of Van Wert currently has a jobs for land credit. So if we have an end user come into Vision Park, purchase city-owned land, they actually then have a reduction of the cost of the purchase or acquisition to the point where that land could be free depending on how many jobs are created. So, one, we have the issue with the floodplain. Two, there's a site inventory program. And now I want to talk about the solution. I have worked with the developer that put up the 100,000 square foot building on Kear Road. And we are prepared to submit a proposal for an application to construct another 100,000 square foot building on Vision Park land. We would like the city to transfer 20 acres of property to the CIC, which would then be transferred to the developer in exchange for completing the mitigation that needs to be done at Maddox Creek as part of that. The property right now is $12,000 an acre, 20 acres, so that's $240,000. And the cost estimate that Mr. Fleming had gotten from Choice One is $250,000. Included in the application would be a $750,000 grant to extend Vision Drive. That would give us access to the proposed site for the spec building. It also improves access to the adjacent 59 acres of ground that is owned by the Business Development Corporation. It's a site authenticated site and just increases access if we would extend Vision Drive.
Is that the area that's the food, that's approved for the food?
That's exactly right.
Right.
So we have gone through a certification or an authentication process, which just means all of the due diligence, all of the annexation, zoning, utilities, all of those things on that site are ready to go, and it's considered a shovel-ready site. The result of the resolution of the floodplain issue is really without outlay of cash by the city of Van Wert. We would end up and we would have a 100,000 square foot building that is ready to be occupied, which I think is great news for Van Wert. Should be finished within 12 months from the start date. And it's really, again, land that would be given away with job creation, either reduced or given away by the city with the current program, the Jobs for Land Credit. Mr. Hatcher has drafted an agreement. If the council approves, I would ask that they would allow the mayor to execute the agreement, because we still have a survey that is going to have to be completed, and we need from the engineering firm the height that he is then to spread. The dirt that he digs up from the mitigation will be spread over the tract 4 parcel in Vision Park.
So this, for council, this, if you remember, this has kind of been in the works for a while. We've been communicating with this developer, I don't know, last year and a half,
Yes.
2 years, trying to get to this
Year and a
point.
half.
Trying to get to this point.
That's all I have.
Okay, any questions from council? For Stacy. Mr. Hatcher?
Well, I don't have any questions for Stacy, but for council, this has been sent out, at least, there's an ordinance for transferring the property to the CIC. That's what this is, that's what is part of this, and been prepared for you to consider.
Yeah, that's the preliminary 006 that everybody was provided.
Correct.
Mr. Jerry, do you have a question?
Well, in that area, I remember it was a couple of years ago, my lawyer was representing a company that was dealing with a flood issue. Is that the same area?
I don't think so, because the floodplain issue that we have now is off of the preliminary map. So I think that was Town Creek, that is on the other side of the road, off of Dutch John Road. There were some flood issues there and north of there, but not the same flood issue as this. This is new.
Well, I'm sorry, Stacy, I think, are we talking about the client that was next to the road that flooded? That's been remediated by what we did on Production Drive.
Okay, so it's in the same area?
Yes, it's right adjacent to it. yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so I was just considering we're giving up, so the city's giving up a third of the property to remediate the remaining 2/3, basically?
And not pay any money. to
Yeah.
fix
I mean,
it,
we're-
and
Basically that land is, now with the floodplain, that land's useless
Okay.
without remediation. So we're trading useless land for remediation, and then the city
And spec
eventually.
building and a spec
Yeah, you know,
extension on the road.
Yeah.
Also economic growth.
Exactly, and then, once somebody rents that spec building or buys it, we get more employees that are paying income taxes, and it's the general basis.
Win-win.
Yes. Any other?
Is this what we expected with the floodplain map? I mean, has anything changed? I know we were initially, we knew where everything was, but we were waiting for a final map, I thought, or a final clarification. Did everything come as,
May I answer
What we thought?
question?
Well, the Maddox Creek flood issue, there really isn't any controversy about that. We recognize and realize that's a problem. The other flood maps, we're working on exactly what that map means and who's affected. And we hope to probably put something out on the website or something about this March meeting coming up with FEMA to discuss if your property's in or out of that. They're going to do a virtual meeting, so stay tuned, that information will be coming.
Okay. And by that, he means they haven't given the information to us yet.
right,
Yeah, we're-
still waiting.
maybe tomorrow, I heard, get some, a notice, so.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Stacy? So, I think we're all set, right? Okay. All right, next, they weren't forward, who's gonna talk?
Well, as promised, we're just back to talk about the redevelopment master plan and here to take your questions really or discuss whatever you'd like to discuss about it. And in the end, I hope that you would all feel comfortable adopting this as a city plan. So that's what we'd like to do is just help you make sure you're comfortable tonight.
So first, are there any questions? And that's this. Any questions?
Are you doing the questions that were given to you? I gave you a question.
I don't remember what your question was, I'm sorry.
No, I talked to him after the meeting, after the last meeting.
I thought you were gonna email me. What was your question?
My question is, that's a very grandiose plan. The thing that concerns me a little bit is there's a lot of green space.
Yes.
With a lot of trees and a lot of plantings. Who's expected to maintain all that?
Right. Kyle actually came to me directly and said, yeah, this is a lot. So the first thing to understand is that this is very conceptual. So we're just trying to get an idea of the feel or the vibe that we'd like to get downtown.
Right, and I get that, but I'd like to get a feel for who's going to pay the Because, hopefully things are going to pick up in Van Wert and we'll have more jobs and more money and whatever. But we still have to make up over $500,000 in the general fund to not rely on the .22 tax. So even in 7 years, which that was the first part of the plan, 7 years. In 7 years, I would seriously doubt we would be in a position where we could add staff to maintain that kind of green space.
Because our Parks Department comes out of the general fund. It doesn't have its own revenue stream.
I think it's fair to say as we start to move through design development, those are very real questions we're going to have to answer. You can't design and build something that for which you can't take care of. And I can speak on behalf of the foundation that I don't think we'd want to build something that wasn't going to be taken care of. So,
I mean, we already have Franklin Park that you guys take care of. And that's a great space and it's used, but it's unfortunate that we don't have the funds to take care of it. And I don't know what the guarantee is that the foundation is always going to take care of that. I don't know. But I'm just seeing a lot more green space and wondering how it's going to be maintained. Because we have the same issue right now with the Garden of the Senses, and I think we're going to eventually have the same situation with the children's garden. It's great, people put them in, and it's all for the benefit of the community, but somebody has to maintain it, and we're just not in a position to do that.
those are fair questions.
Because 7 years from now, many of the people in this room that are going to ultimately approve this aren't going to be here. So we just need to make sure we have a plan going forward. And I apologize, Martha, I forgot about your question. That was the only question that we had, that I had, or that I got. Mr. Jared, you had a question?
Well, it's more of a comment on what I'm seeing. I mean, part of it has to do with my daughter was learning the difference between what's downtown, what's uptown. Well, I should say uptown Maine is quickly becoming a ghost town. I'm concerned about all the businesses leaving, and that whatever we're doing, we're not doing it right. We're not keeping people there. So, I mean, I'd like to have business neighbors.
Okay. So, are there any questions from council?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I brought it up in one of the virtual meetings, and I don't know whether you guys are gonna be able to talk to this, but one thing that I see that has kind of become it was a hot topic at one point, I think, before I even came to town, was the fact that with 127 running right through the middle of downtown and all the truck and industrial traffic that brings, is that a deterrent of any kind to any of this? I know industrial traffic on bricks and things like that, that's tough, and it's tough, tough to maintain over the course of time. And I know that part of the group that handled this was from Bell Fountain, and if you go to Bell Fountain, they have a truck bypass route. I don't think that's an option here. Has that discussion come up? Has there been any talk of how that will be handled?
It has come up. We know that the truck traffic on Washington Street is going to negatively impact rent values on those that are on Washington Street. So we've had to be very careful on, as we enter through conversations about, what types of businesses are going to occupy those spaces, how we're going to interact with those spaces. There's, you start to look through the plan, and there's not a lot of outdoor dining spaces on Washington Street in part because of that. Very real problems. I don't know that we have a solution for.
And I don't know if there is a solution to reroute it the way that Bell Fountain has, but.
Yeah. Andrew, years ago.
I know there was a discussion at one point.
I mean, 25 years ago, there was a discussion trying to figure out a way to get.
Finally got rid of the land, so I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know.
and then it happened again 10 years ago, and then now all of a sudden, there's no real way physically
looking at the map, there's no way
to get them out of
And
Van Wert.
truckers don't necessarily want to go down that route either. It's just, it's their most affordable.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's, I know the transportation industry, so my guys don't want to drive through here, but there's not really any other choice.
I think the other thing that we can also learn from is as we started to apply for the National Register, we had to tell a story about the history of downtown Van Wert and talk about its period of significance. And really the period of significance for downtown was when it was started, construction was started in the 1860s, and it was thriving up through about the late 1960s, which is when they built the US 30 bypass. That's when the traffic really started to move downtown. It's when people stopped investing in the buildings. And so we have to be really cautious. We don't want the truck traffic downtown, but we also don't want to lose through traffic either. That's a lifeblood to our business.
That's the quandary.
So
Yep.
Do both.
We would love to have as much help on that as possible.
That was my big question.
Yep.
I know it, you get those trucks in there trying to turn right, turn left and stuff. It can be a
I
disaster.
had to take a detour on the way here tonight because there was a truck that was stuck down at the intersection.
Yeah. Mr. Jared, did you have another question?
There's going to be another ghost town comment, but he covered it.
Okay.
I guess if you want to talk bypasses, just go watch that cartoon movie Cars. What happened when it was bypassed by a highway? It turned into a ghost town.
Yeah.
How many bypasses can we add to the town before the town doesn't exist?
So, if there are no questions from council, the Van Wert Forward Group has asked for a formal acceptance of the plan. And I believe, Mr. Hatcher, what we need is a simple resolution that we can address at the next meeting, accepting the 2021 Downtown Redevelopment Master Plan as submitted. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And what does that do when we accept that?
just really gives them a piece of paper
Okay.
that says City of Van Wert is on board. And when they go for, XYZ grant, those types of things, it shows that, the city is bought into this plan.
It's a box we check.
Yeah.
We've had conversations with organizations like Jobs Ohio, and it's a very specific question they ask. Do you have a downtown master plan?
Mhm.
And they ask for a copy of that. They ask for, evidence that the city has adopted that
Yep.
plan.
So we're just
Good enough.
accepting, basically saying that we'll be partners going forward in this.
Yeah, well,
Ken, did,
maybe you're not saying it this way, but you kind of want to know, does this commit us to it?
Yeah, I mean, I
Oh.
wanted to make sure that it didn't tie us to anything financially.
I would say
no.
no, because there have been previous plans that, because of the way certain things have happened, one from 7 or 8 years ago, certain aspects of it are impossible now
Right.
because of other things that have happened in between. But it was still something to look at and to help guide decisions along the way. That some happened, some didn't.
yeah. It doesn't, it ties us to the overarching plan, but it doesn't tie us specifically to
We would
items.
We would love if you wanted to kick in financial resources. I mean, we would love to do it too, but you're gonna have to write the check.
So, do I have a motion for that resolution that I just described?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Davis, Mr. Egler seconds. John, you have all that for next time? You good
I'm
with
good-
the language?
I'm good with it, for the downtown room bill?
Yeah. Yeah, the resolution language. Drew?
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes. So, Mr. Ash will bring that to the next meeting and we'll consider it then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else from you guys? Mitch, you have something?
Yeah, I would just like to thank Jay and Kyle Klinker for helping with the Chocolate Walk Friday, get the sidewalks cleaned off, and make 300 walkers, so those sidewalks were great, and nobody fell, and it was a little cold, but we had about 298 walks, so that's pretty good.
Good.
So all 300 were sold, so big shout out to you guys, thanks for, I hit them in the morning and in the afternoon, so thank you.
All right. Any other comments, communications, and petitions? Okay. Administrative reports, Mayor, Mr. Ken Markwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. In case, you might have noticed in one of the governor's recent news conferences, he mentioned settlement in the opioid lawsuit.
Yes.
And I just wanted to remind council that we are part of what is called the One Ohio Plan, and that was part of this, but that was just a settlement with one particular company, and the overall lawsuit is still ongoing. This has just come out recently. We have no more details other than what the governor said, $24.7 million settlement with McKinsey and Company. And as part of the One Ohio Plan, there's about 3 different ways that money is to be allocated. Nearly every county in Ohio, many cities and villages are participants in the One Ohio Plan. So I've talked to the law director and we're paying attention to it. We have no more details at this time. But since the governor mentioned it, in case you got any questions, the city of Van Wert is part of the One Ohio Plan.
Yep.
And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for the mayor from council, from the public? Thank you, Ken. Safety Service Director, Mr. Jay Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Davis has 2 ordinances he's going to be asking for preparation tonight, one being our standard annual gov deals legislation, the second one being an ordinance we're ready to sell some items. Those items include a 2012 Dodge Charger for the police department, a 2015 Explorer Police Department, 2 2007 Crown Vics Police Department, a 97 pickup Street Department, 95 pickup Street Department, 1995 International Dump Truck, Street Department, a Myers snowplow, and a Bobcat skid steer from wastewater treatment in 1980. So, and those will be on that ordinance that he's going to ask for you to pass next week. The barrels downtown that you're going to see for a few weeks here, maybe a good month, are there to protect the water meters that are installed in sidewalks from freezing with the forecast that's coming this week and through next week. We put those up and we found, we know it helps to make sure frost doesn't penetrate down through the sidewalk. When the sidewalks get clear like they are now, and then we get this extended freeze period, the frost goes down deeper than in your yard and stuff, so we're just trying to make sure we're not frozen up for years. We have, today, as of today, finished installation of all hand dryers in all city parks, facilities, departments in this building. So on your way out tonight, please use the facilities and enjoy the new hand dryers.
They're nice.
They are nice. And that's all I have to report.
All right. Any questions from council for the Safety Service Director? From the public? Mr. Jared?
Well, I have a third question. Should residents be also concerned about the same issues with the water meters freezing up?
Typically no, because we usually throw all the snow on top of them as we plow streets, so they're full of insulation.
Okay.
Not, you know, they probably have more to worry about lines in their homes.
Okay.
I'm not here to tell anybody to let their water run, but it's a good idea, but I just know what that leads to when they turn a faucet on for a month and then come back and get their meter read. But a little trickle doesn't hurt.
The question I was going to ask you, an individual expressed concern about the Fox and Urban Road. In the middle of the night, trucks have a habit of like blasting right through the lights. In terms of safety, is there anything that can be done to improve that?
I can ask PD to increase patrol there and keep an eye on it.
Okay, now my last question. Is there a policy in place for when secondary roads get salted?
Yeah, there's a clear policy on that. They don't. Because we salt about 10, 15 miles of primary road that we take care of. We'd be adding over 40 miles of secondary road to salt. It would take 2/3 more budget to do that. I appreciate the thank you. I monitor some Facebook chatter. I apologize, I guess, for the weather last Thursday night. That is one of those deals that it just completely is impossible. We had to salt primaries because we had snow, rain, snow, and they were slippery. Well, by the time we got done with that, the secondaries were slush, and they were, anybody paid attention to the thermometer that night, and it crashed, and things were froze up. And once it does that, we can't scrape it off anymore.
Well, that's why I asked about salting. I mean, there are some roads that are that thick in ice now.
And we wouldn't take care of it now. Not as in the conditions we're in. It needs traffic and sunshine.
Yeah.
Mr. Egbert?
I used to work for the city. Salt don't work below 18 degrees, salt don't work. And I know what we done then was, grit. Do we still use grit?
We don't like to because we've got so much storm sewer now and it ends up in the sewer.
The only thing we would do then, we'd load up a dump truck with grit and go around on the stop signs, and so nobody was doing this, but that's the only thing you can do.
Then we have to clean out storm drains in the spring, and that gets messy too.
Yeah, I know it's not the best condition, we just need to slow down, but.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Safety Service Director?
I just wanted to double check. Joe, what intersection did you say, Fox and Washington?
Urban Road. Oh, sorry, Washington and Urban Road. Yeah, I had it wrong.
Fox and Irvin, Fox and Washington is,
They're both about
yeah,
just as
but
bad when it comes
it's usually
to
Fox
roads.
Right,
and,
well, the person who complained to me complained because, he didn't feel safe with trucks passing by at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, there was a period of time when they're just completely unregulated.
yeah. It's Fox and Washington, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's been we've had that issue in the past too. Okay. All right, thank you, Jay. Auditor, Mrs. Martha Balliet.
You should all have a copy of the January financial. have to stop and think what month I'm in now. January financials that I believe I shared with everyone. The first page of that report shows that we had just over $14 million in various bank accounts and investments, and that same amount on the city's books. The second page of that report.
When you get back, Martha, tomorrow, will you reshare that? Because I don't think I got that.
I don't think I got it either.
Yeah.
Well, and I had an issue with sharing.
Okay, yeah, it didn't come through on our end.
Okay.
Can you also email it for everybody?
I can do that. I can
Okay.
do that.
Just so we have it.
Yeah. So you don't know what I'm telling you anyway.
Yeah, no. No, I was thinking that I did something wrong.
No, I tried to, I hit share and then I got a reject on Drew's email address, so I must have that in wrong. So then I wasn't sure if it didn't share with anybody or if it just didn't share with him, so now I know it didn't share with anybody.
Yeah, it didn't come through.
John and I talked about this today, we'll figure it out again. So, just real quickly, all accounts did have a positive balance at the end of January. And surprisingly, we took in the general fund, $581,000, and we only spent $552,000, which I don't know if you took a look at the Income Tax Administrator's tax report, but she was pleasantly surprised on income tax collections for the month of January. So we're not really sure what's going on, but it was positive. So I'll send those reports out so you can see the actual numbers. In January, it's really kind of hard to make any projection as to what's going to happen the rest of the year. So then I have a few invoices that need to be approved on a then and now. I have, which did that get shared?
Nope.
No?
I have it.
Okay. Yeah, but I allegedly shared it on.
You
So,
tried.
Yeah, I tried.
Kind of like I tried to remember your
I tried
question
to.
from last
We
meeting.
have 5 invoices from Haviland Energy, which they do the sludge removal at the wastewater treatment plant, and they did not invoice us for 5 invoices for 2020. They discovered after the end of the year. So these are all invoices for earlier in 2020. The first invoice is for $595.75. The second one is $1,527.50. The third one is $3,235.50. The fourth one is $1,752.75. And the last one is $1,704.75. So if we can ask for those to be approved, that is all I have.
Okay. And Mr. Regler has that for his meeting committee. Any questions for the auditor from council? From the public? Thank you, Martha. Law Director, Mr. John Hatcher.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. First, I did receive an email from Mr. Lawson about the CRA agreements.
Just leave it.
I need somebody to ask for those to be prepared for the meeting on the 22nd. I believe they've been submitted to the schools.
It went through the CRA board last week,
Yes.
and they are scheduled for next school board meeting for
24th.
Van Wert on the 24th, and then Vantage
So
in
who,
March.
Would that, I think that'd either be economic development or finance. I don't know who normally have to do that. Is that finance that normally does the CRA agreements? I can't remember.
I don't remember either. It doesn't matter. Jeff, if you'll just ask for him to be prepared,
Okay.
and then he can, anybody can ask for something to be prepared. It doesn't have to be the committee. So if you could ask for it to be prepared, and then he'll figure out what committee it needs to
And
come
what am I,
through.
how should I phrase that?
It would be, you would be asking for 2 CRA agreements, one for, and I'll email them to you, Jeff, so you have them.
Okay.
They're community reinvestment area agreements. One to approve would be for First Federal Savings and Loan, and the other is, and help me pronounce this. Trucent. Okay, the other would be for Trucent Renewable Chemicals LLC. And I will email the CRA agreement, see if Jeff, they have them,
But we need to ask for them to be prepared tonight so that,
so we can pass them on.
so we can pass them the next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're gonna email those to me now?
Yes, I can.
Don't try sharing, just email.
I'm just gonna. I have one more thing, as soon as, there we go. It's sent to you, Jeff. There was an email sent today regarding income tax funding and how the city can, what the city can do with moving money around and how it's allocated. And I responded to the question, but I think it's kind of important that it gets addressed so maybe the public understands.
Who is the question from?
Councilman Davis.
Okay.
And posed the question to me and a couple of others.
Okay.
I responded to it, I believe Martha responded to it as well. We have 3 separate taxes that are on our, that make up the 1.72% that citizens are taxed, okay? And they're done 2 different ways. The first, the 1%, which is the tax we use to fund our general fund. That is approved, or was approved by an ordinance, which the Ohio Revised Code allows every single municipality the ability to approve by an ordinance up to 1% income tax, okay? And we've done that. We've done that a long, long time ago. I'm not even sure how long ago it was, but that's on the books. That's what we use to fund our general fund. And that is the only part of our income tax. And then Martha, if I go too far in what I'm saying, please rein me back in. That is the only part of our income tax that could be changed and manipulated without having to go to the voters. Okay? The 0.5%, which is what we call the street tax, and the 0.22%, the police and fire capital fund tax. Those are very specific on how they're allocated because they were approved by the voters of the city of Van Wert. Okay? And like we wanted to make a minor change so we could add sidewalks. We had to take that to the voters.
Yes.
Okay? And that was just recently, within the last year or so.
Yeah.
So any kind of manipulation to the 0.5 or the 0.22%, we have to put on the ballot. Okay? The 1% that covers the general fund is the one thing I guess we could I don't want to manipulate, it's not the right word I'm going for, but council could make changes to it.
We can spend that money as council sees fit, and that's what we do with the annual budget every year.
Yes, but that money is also the money that we have the most issues with.
Well, and prior to us having the 0.5% street tax, there was money transferred every year from the general fund, from that 1% tax, transferred to the street department, or to the street fund. So that, with that 1% money, you can transfer that to any fund that you want and spend it on anything that you want. But that 0.5% and the 0.22%, they can only be spent on what the taxpayers voted those dollars to be collected for. So, yeah.
I hope that is helpful, okay? Any discussion on that, that's kind of the basics. And there is a section in the Ohio Revised Code that's in the municipal corporation sections that talks specifically about taxation and how, how all that works. So it's, if it is something that is outside of the 1% tax, it is very specific on how it's allocated, and there's very little that can be done other than what you ask the voters to approve. So I guess unless anybody has any specific questions on that, and believe me, I'm giving you the very general breakdown. If you want anything more in depth than that, I would probably have to do a little more research and get back to you. So I'm kind of out on as far as I can go with my knowledge.
I don't know what question you asked, but
He answered my question earlier.
Okay.
We just want to bring it up and make sure it's discussed.
Okay.
It's more of a public service announcement at this point.
Mr. Jared.
I guess I'm curious about the email that brought up the question.
Well, it was just, the email was that there was questions about how the money could be allocated. And I just wanted to be clear that, the 1% is one thing,
Right.
but the other 0.72% is very specific and very limited.
Yes.
And that's all.
Okay.
And that's, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Right, I never thought for a second we could even take 1/10 of 1% off the general, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, hopefully I helped clarify something or, at least, give you the basics, give the basics on how that is set up. Okay. Thank you.
All right, any questions for the law director? From council? From the public? Thank you, John. Committee reports, Health Service and Safety, Mr. Bill Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess on January the 11th, I addressed council about a specific ordinance that related to fences and planting screens, et cetera, which was Van Wert Ordinance 150-36. And we had a chance to look at that for 2 weeks, and then the last time around, we talked about doing this, and we asked our law director to bring about a change. And we talked about the form that we had, and our actual ordinance was only, on this particular issue, was only eight lines long. And it was just very, very wide and broad. The idea, if you look around, we got a hodgepodge of properties that have fences that are not very aesthetically pleasing, from chicken wire to, in some places, skids have been put up and used as fences. And it doesn't enhance the properties at all, but I guess it keeps the dogs in sometimes. So, had a lot of help on this from Mr. Lawson, because he had actually written up a document which would be very specific to any new fences that would be put up, that they had to conform to a certain specific way. And in this one, you probably saw the one that the law director prepared. Does anybody have any questions about this particular thing?
No, but when the law director sent out the, I guess, prepared using that language, the one thing, and I think I emailed everybody.
I definitely got your email.
So the one thing I asked is we had discussed grandfather clauses, because we've had that issue in the past. So you'll see on the prepared 009 that letter G gives language to the effect of what happens to everybody's current fences. So that was a request that we had talked about it, and then I wanted to make sure that that was part of it.
Yes. And when I sent a second, is it okay if I?
Yeah, no, that was the second draft.
I sent the second draft out on Friday with that section G, and I wanted everyone to take a look at that. I drafted that with the basic idea of what we talked about, but I wasn't completely happy with how it read.
Neither am I.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I think we need to put in, I think we need to define substantially damaged.
I agree.
And I think we should probably put some sort of percentage, like length percentage in. Like if you have 400 foot of fence and you have 1 8-foot section that gets damaged, I don't think it's appropriate for us to expect somebody to replace the all 400 foot because 8 foot. But I think we need to put a percentage in there. And I don't know if it needs to be like a third of the fence or 25% of the existing fence. That I think we need to define that number.
I would agree.
That was my only concern with G, is I think
And that's
we just
why
need
I
to put a
asked
number
everybody else
to
Take a
it.
look at it, because I knew it was vague, and I couldn't come up with any, at the moment of drafting it,
Mhm.
I didn't have a specific idea, so I sent it out for everyone's ability to edit that.
So my question would be then, looking at this, if two sections are damaged, they can keep everything else, but then do they have to put in those two panels under the new guidance, or can they?
And that's part of G.
Right.
That's part of that defining of G.
Because the problem is, as it's written, Jeff, I would say yes.
Yeah, as it's written right now, if you have an 8-foot section, you could have 400 foot of, 4-foot fence that's chicken wire, and then you have to put in,
And that, yeah.
8 foot or something nice.
Yeah, 8 foot of something or whatever that's.
That's the way I read it, and I wasn't sure on where we're going with this.
We need to think, and this isn't prepared on an emergency.
It is not.
So we can get, community input, and I don't know that we need to make a have a decision today, which is one of the ways, one of the reasons why we're bringing it up now is we want the public to communicate to us, what would be fair language and fair verbiage for the grandfathering in of current fences upon damage. Because that's probably, that's most likely going to be the biggest question mark.
Yeah, because if you replace an old fence, it's going to be you're going to have to follow the regulations. If you have a storm that takes out, a section of your fence, at what point do you have to replace the whole thing? That's kind of where we're going. What the public and public input is probably.
So I don't.
About most important.
We could certainly field communication now, but I would much prefer to get input from the public to see what they think would be a fair, an appropriate response to. If you have a very big fence and then all of a sudden 2 8-foot sections go down, is that enough to replace the whole fence? That's why I was thinking it should be probably, I was thinking some sort of percentage of the distance, of the length of the fence. If you have 24-foot fence and you lose 16 foot, you should probably replace the whole thing. But if you have 400 foot and you lose 16 foot, that's a different conversation.
And then the conversation of, does it have to be that, or can it?
Yeah, there's two issues here.
Yeah, can you replace it as it was before if it's a small section?
Can you put in a non-appropriate fence if it's a small section? And how big does that small section need to be before you have to replace the whole thing?
That inappropriate section have to match the whole inappropriate fence that's already up.
Yes.
I think you gotta take into account too, why people have their fences. Some people need to throw a fence up to keep a dog in. And if they've got a damaged piece of fence, they're gonna put up whatever they've gotta do to get it, to keep their dog in for maybe a short time being. So we've gotta, we gotta give some leeway somewhere to make that happen before we get.
And that's why you don't really put
It's gotta be this,
timelines on these things.
Yeah. So we gotta define all that too. We need it to be fixed within a reasonable period of time, and we need to define what that reasonable period of time is.
That's a good point too.
Those are all valid points.
Do we need to consider whether the ordinance will say the entire perimeter of the fence or just one section? If you got a fence that goes two sides of your backyard.
And that's what we're talking, that's part of it, is how much needs to be damaged before you're not allowed to repair it.
But we want to make sure that it's the entire perimeter, not just somebody saying, well, it was only the east-west section that was damaged, so
we just need to make sure that it's clear.
Yeah.
And that it's appropriate and fair. I don't want to make somebody tear a whole fence down for a small section. I don't think that's the appropriate use of the the power that this body has, nor I really don't want to make people spend money that they don't have.
While we were talking, I pulled up 3 different cities, and the ordinance that we're attempting to pass is 2 pages longer than anybody else has in their fencing ordinance. So, other cities don't have it defined this way, but I think if we're gonna go forward with this, we need to make sure we get all the details ironed out before we go forward with it.
Yep, and that's why, I mean,
Times and percents.
and that's why we have a 6-month, or 6-week process.
And Dave's right, if we're gonna put it forward, it needs to be enforceable. I mean, it's gotta be something that we're willing to send somebody out to write somebody up for.
And that's part of the reason why we're here in the first place, because what we have is. we've had
Not
issues
enforceable.
enforcing it.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
I have a question about B1 or D1,
Okay.
which there's a permit fee of $20 to put up a new fence. I would think that if somebody they've got damage to a fence, that they would need to conditionally have a conditional permit, not to charge them for, but a conditional permit for them to repair that fence. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's going to go in place of it.
Well, if you look at E, it outlines the building inspector shall inspect all fences prior to installation to verify location and compliance within the fencing code. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
saying
just-
that they have to come out and look at it first to determine that it fits all the requirements before they get the permit.
Yeah, but that's just.
But that's not
information, that's
fixing
not
it.
fixing it.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
but you could tie that all in with 2 words and make it install and repair,
You could.
and it would qualify.
You could, but as of right now, it reads, and I would agree with Mr. Hellman, that the application of E, as we speak, is to a new fence.
Well, and to be honest, it wouldn't matter anyway, because we have decided that building permits we don't need to have building permits for anything up to $1,000. So you show me it's 500?
5,000.
5,000, okay, well, that's even you're not gonna put nobody's gonna put a fence up that's $5,000, a repair. I mean, you're not even get together if it's new.
But there's an exception for fences.
Yeah, I think that $5,000, I think there always was an exception.
Is there an exception for?
Because we have to inspect.
Oh, property line,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, and really the inspection most of the time for fences is going out and finding the pins, right, Jay?
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
the
I
primary
was
function of that inspection.
mistaken.
What we're talking about, in my opinion, what we're talking about here is existing fences that are suspect anyway. So what we're sitting here is that the fence that is gonna come down 20% or half was already an eyesore to begin with. So in my opinion, there shouldn't be no grandfather in. You know, we're not talking about a chain link fence that's professionally installed, or, you know, we're talking about fences like he was talking about, skids and all this other. So I don't care if I don't care if 8 foot goes down and he's got 90 foot, now that this is an ordinance, he's gonna have to comply with the fence. Or the ordinance is no good. Because that person is going to getting away with what we're trying to get away with now, if, you know what I mean? We're not fixing the problem, because the problem fences, they're not gonna fix them on their own, and if the storm comes through, it's the only shot we got at getting it fixed. And if 8 foot goes down, and if we can't force the person to get a fence, then the ordinance is no good.
The only issue with, and I agree with you completely, the only issue with that is we've tried that, and the courts have not gone along with us in similar situations.
Well, but with what he's saying, I mean, I think he's saying that if we have the ability to set that percentage at whatever level we want to set it at. If we want to set it at 5%, could we not do that? That's what Jeff's getting at.
In theory.
If a small tree falls on one section of fence and that fence is rickety and falling down anyway, that gets your fence fixed.
Mr. Jared?
In theory, you have a right to your opinion. The Constitution trumps it. It's called an ex post facto law. You can't go backwards and say, what you were doing is fine, but now it's not, because it's already in place. You can't just tell people they have to tear down that fence to build a new one. It's not allowed.
No, nobody's telling them that.
That's what you were trying to do.
No, I'm not. I set up a storm, takes it down.
His argument is that we can write this ordinance in such a way that you're not allowed to repair a fence that doesn't comply with the current ordinance. That's the argument.
And you're Ward 4, you live in Ward 4. All of the wards are different. I mean, to one degree or another. Like Ward 1, typically a little more run down, just the way it is. I think we need to balance, and you even yourself said this, and we also, in this meeting, were discussing the CHIP grant. Obviously, for low-income property owners, we need to balance that in too. I mean, we can't go in with a steamroller on the people on these issues. Be glad if they have the resources to fix what they have, and be grateful for the CHIP grants when they come in to help maybe even replace fences as part of that improvement. I don't know.
And to be honest, that's why I, in this meeting, am asking for public input. That's why we have public input. We are representatives of the public. You know, that's the whole point. So we will make a decision, and it's up to the public to communicate what they believe is an appropriate language for fences.
I think in that case, then I would not ask that it be brought in at this point until there's further discussion from the public.
Well, I mean, it's actually.
We've asked him to prepare, but a motion hasn't been made to bring it in.
Okay, so when we get to reading of ordinances, you're gonna need, in order for it not to be read the first time, you're gonna need to ask for it to be tabled, since it's on the agenda.
So, once it's tabled, does it have to be rewritten and brought back?
No, you just ask for it to be read on its first reading. But also remember, this is a 6-week time frame. It's not prepared on an emergency, so even if it gets read tonight, you still have a month.
Mr. President, I think I would disagree, because I don't think it's been introduced. It's been asked to be prepared, we haven't introduced it yet.
It's not on the agenda.
It's on the back.
It's on the back.
I don't know where that came from.
It shouldn't be, as it wasn't introduced yet, right?
I don't even know what this
I don't have it on
is.
mine.
I do, it's right here, top of the.
So,
Okay.
sorry, when I was trained, Veronica said that's
Ordinance number
put it on the
incorrect.
I
agenda.
thought it was 009.
So it has to
I
go
had to
six.
do- After my first draft, I had to correct the ordinance number, because
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
okay, well, Drew has a question then.
Yes,
Okay, so question, when I was trained, they
okay.
said if the motion has to be prepared, put it on the agenda in their first reading. Is that only if it has to be introduced?
I think it has to be introduced to be up
Okay.
for first reading.
Then,
That's that's my interpretation of that. I mean,
Has to be-
prepared means I prepared it for everyone to see it. Introduced means it's now part of the legislative
Okay.
process.
Okay.
well, then I,
Well, if it was
Then-
an emergency, it's always, because it'll be running through that night, but this isn't an emergency,
okay,
so.
well, then that's my fault, Drew.
That's all right.
Okay,
I'm
so,
sorry, I didn't hear you, Dave.
Still in the legislative docket though, because it's been prepared.
Correct.
So you have to either have to table it or you have to pass it either in
yeah, so
one of 3 readings.
you can choose not to introduce it.
Until it's.
I think that's a good call.
How about we do this? How about you just ask for it to be tabled for tonight, and then next time, 2 weeks from now, you can ask for it to be introduced, and then we'll read it the first time, just to cover all our bases. Okay? All right.
So still, prepared, not on the agenda, introduced on the agenda for,
We'll let the law director email you an actual decision on that. Because I believe it should be on the agenda once it's asked to be prepared. but I am not a lawyer.
Has been for,
Right, that's,
I will look into it.
we never introduce anything prior to the agenda.
yeah,
So that's why the preparation is on the agenda to be introduced at the next.
Gotcha.
That's
I
my
understand your point.
non-legal opinion.
No, I understand. It's been prepared.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah. I think you're okay. I believe.
Just
All right, anything else, Mr. Marshall?
Well, I'll look into it if I will.
All right. Economic Development, Mr. Jeff Callis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the law director to prepare 2 CRA agreements, one with Trucent Renewable Chemicals and one with First Federal.
Do they need to be prepared on an emergency basis? Time
On an
commitment?
emergency,
Both of them?
both of them.
Okay. Second to, I guess they're 2 different ones?
So we have to do those separate?
We have to, yeah. We'll do
Trucent Renewable Chemicals.
Trucent Renewable. Second. Please call the roll, Drew.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Now, same thing with First Federal
Another CRA for First Federal
on an emergency.
on an emergency.
Mr. Egler, second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
That it, Jeff?
That's all I have.
All right. Any questions for Economic Development? Yes.
What about any of the things that we talked about? What about the agreement, partnership agreement for the grant, CHIP grant with the county of Van Wert? Do we need to do anything
Oh,
with that?
Mr. Egler did that early on.
We did that already.
And the other agreement for Vision Park.
That's going to be passed tonight.
That's property.
Yeah,
The property equipment for tonight.
yep. Yeah, that's under
Thank you.
another committee. No, that's fine. Anything else for Economic Development? Thank you, Jeff. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Joel Penton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Parks and Recreation has no report tonight.
Okay, any questions for Joel? Thank you. Finance, Mr. Jeff Egler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had then and now that needs paid for Hagen Energy for sludge removal.
Okay, motion to pay the then and now, second by Mrs. Murgy. Martha went through all the dollar amounts, there are 5 different invoices. Any questions? Drew, please call the roll.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And I'd like to make a motion that we give the Van Wert Convention and Visitors Bureau $11,368.03.
Okay, so motion for a supplemental appropriation for 11, what was it, please?
$11,368.03.
Got that, Martha? Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Murgy. Any questions or concerns? And that'll come out of the Economic Development, I don't remember the number of that fund. Is it 801 or something?
No.
I don't remember. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, 215.
215, okay. Not even close. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air.
We knew what you meant.
All right, Drew, please call the roll.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
So we can, just to clarify, we can pass that 2 weeks, and then you can, with that, you can cut them a check
Yes.
after that?
Actually, I can cut them a check prior to supplemental being prepared, and I prefer to wait until after the end of March for the supplemental, because my financial statements are being prepared, and I just told them Friday that I would have no supplementals between now and the end of March.
Okay.
Because then they have to note that in the financials.
That's fine.
So,
I will-
But I can still cut them a check, so,
I will let them know after March 1.
I can cut them a check prior to to the supplemental. Because we have enough money appropriated, just not for them. So I can cut them a check.
Okay, then
And then,
I'm-
and so we'll do a supplemental after the 1st of April, this with some other things as well.
oh, you'll cut them a check now?
Yes,
We'll pass that,
yes,
this ordinance, okay,
yes.
all right, I understand. A little slow tonight. Okay, all right.
And this Chromebook and I are still getting acquainted, so, so I think, I don't know, I see a 2102008. Is that, have I already done that one, or every time I click on it, I get off of it, it kicks me out of it.
We've already, that was asked, you need to ask for that, you need to ask for that to be prepared and run it all the way through.
All right.
Basically what, and just so everybody knows, we passed the salary ordinance, and on the, what's it called? The exhibit, all the way at the end, Exhibit 2, the clerk of council salary was not adjusted on the one that we formally passed. So this one has the clerk of council salary adjusted as we discussed a few meetings ago.
And I highlighted it so everybody could find it on Exhibit 2. It's the one that's in bold.
Yeah, so the clerk account, we talked about moving the clerk's salary amount to $5,500 per year, but when we passed that ordinance, it wasn't changed appropriately. This one fixes that, so that's why we have to amend the whole ordinance. So Jeff, you need to run that, ask for it to be prepared and all the way through.
I think I've got it. I think I just hit it. An ordinance that would, 2011-064 pending for the salaries and compensation of employees.
Yep.
All right, I'd like to have the law director prepare an ordinance that would do that.
All right. Prepare an ordinance on an emergency to amend 20-11-064. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Penton. Please call the roll.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
That ordinance has been prepared. It's ordinance 02008. I'd like to bring that in front of council.
Okay, motion to introduce. Second by Mr. Penton.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
And I'd like to, this is not an emergency, so I'd like to suspend rules.
Okay, motion to suspend. Second by Mr. Penton.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
And I'd like to pass this on its first and final reading.
Okay, motion to pass on first and final. Second by Mr. Penton.
Ordinance number 21-02-008, an ordinance amending ordinance 20-11-064, providing for the salaries and compensation of employees in the Service Department, Auditor's Office, Income Tax and Administration of the City of Van Wert, establishing job classifications, salary ranges and limitations, authorizing specific number of employees, providing for sick leave, vacation schedule, allowances, immunization against communicable diseases, and other benefits, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Penton?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Hellman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
I'm hoping that concludes my report.
Any questions for finance? Thank you, Jeff.
The one for the council salary?
Yeah, 20-007 is finance as well.
Oh,
I got another, I don't see 007. Let me,
here you go. Sorry about that.
all right. I gotta run this all the way through too.
Yes.
I'd like to have the law director prepare an ordinance to establish a salary for the city treasurer.
It's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, city council
City
and
treasurer, vice
Okay.
president.
And city council members and the city council president for the term beginning January 1st, thereafter and declaring an emergency.
There you go. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Penton.
Mr. Egliff?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
That has been prepared, it's 02007. I'd like to bring that for council's consideration.
Second by Mr. Penton.
Mr. Egliff?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
This is on an emergency, so I'd like to suspend rules.
Motion to suspend rules. Second by Mr. Penton.
Mr. Egliff?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And pass 02007 on its first and final.
Motion to pass on first and final. Second by Mr. Penton. Please read the ordinance, call the roll.
Ordinance number 21-02-007, an ordinance to establish the salary positions of city treasurer, city council members, and city council president, with term beginning January 1, 2022, and thereafter, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egliff?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay.
There is something else I want to bring up. I met with the treasurer. I had questions asked me about, and the county property tax and, within the city and how, and why don't we have a seat at that table? And I went up and talked with the treasurer and the chairman of the county commissioners, and they kind of agreed that we that we wouldn't have a say-so on the vote between them three but we could have a seat at that table for an opinion on, blighted properties that they're giving breaks to that they shouldn't. And I would hope that, Ken would reach out to and find out more on that.
Do they do that? All that's on an annual basis, right?
I think so.
Or it could be just.
Or when someone comes up and request for a, break on their taxes.
You mean Treasurer McIntosh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ken, could you reach
Because
out and,
houses that are being rented out should not be, in my opinion, they're used for profitability, should not be giving a tax break to because of the condition of their property is, less than, and us being the ones that's gotta deal with that in the city, they thought we seat at that table, who I naturally thought would be Bill.
Bill Lawson? Jay?
Do you have to make an appointment for that, or is it walk-in days? I mean.
I just went up and talked to Jeff, but.
No, if I want to appeal my taxes, do I have to make a?
Yeah, I think you have to make an appointment with them, appeal.
I think there's a form you have to fill out to get it appealed.
Well, yeah, if there was just a mechanism that we would know who was up for.
Yeah, if
appeal.
somebody, we could at least
Well, yeah, they would probably.
yay or nay whether or not we needed to be at that conversation.
Okay.
Ken, can you check that and get back to us?
Yeah.
Good. It's a good move.
That concludes my report.
All right. Any questions for finance? Thank you, Jeff. Judiciary and annexation, Mrs. Joy Murgy.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the law director explained, I need to request an ordinance be prepared to authorize the detachment from the city of 2 parcels as mentioned on John Brown Road, and that be prepared as an emergency.
Okay, motion to prepare on an emergency. This is the de-annexation agreement, or whatever it's called officially. Second by detachment. Second by Mr. Callis. Any questions?
Yeah, what's the advantage to them to have that?
Pay no taxes.
Well, they're stuck, they're not getting utilities. They need water and sewer to do anything with it. I think they want to put a house there, and it's really in a void. We're not gonna get there, we won't extend to serve a house. So they really don't have much.
So they're paying taxes and not getting the benefit of the ability to have water and sewer there.
Because of where they're located.
Yeah.
On John Brown.
Yeah.
Because I see, I see the trailer court coming in one of these. Because the trailer court's gonna have sewage and water, city water.
But that's where it stops.
Well, I thought they was north of the soccer field,
Right, the trailer park, the old Conrad's.
and south of the trailer, or south of the,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're in the city now, and they have water and sewer. They put it in and got annexed. But the water line stops at that trailer park, so it's,
So anything north of that doesn't have?
no, it's probably 1,500 or at least 1,500 foot run of pipe to get to this lot.
And it's gonna be, it's
It's not-
cost prohibitive for both them, and we're not gonna do it.
We won't extend it just for that, no.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm, John Brown Road, I can see them being forced in like 118 and 127, because there's houses on the other side in between, Leeson Avenue and Woodland. You know, those houses, are they on city sewage? I can see them getting targeting, and
It was all a targeted area 10 years ago. EPA basically dropped it because it all became unaffordable to the homeowners. Because the grants dried up that helped fund like 118, 127. Once those grants weren't available, 100% cost to the homeowner became $20,000, $30,000 per house. I'm not making numbers up, but they were huge. You couldn't afford to do it. So they had to drop it. Someday, you're right, someday we'll be down, John, but
so, you know, it's not gonna happen, you don't see it happening in the next 5, 10 years, then, where it's gonna be a detriment to these. That's what
No.
No.
It's their risk. If they need to do something now, they may have to tie in later. This wouldn't exempt them from that. If sewer goes by their house, they would have to tie in it.
Okay.
But we're not there.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a motion, and I don't know if I got a second. Second by Mr. Callis, to prepare on an emergency.
Mrs. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Ava?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
That concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions for judiciary and annexation? Thank you, Joy. Streets and alleys, Mr. Steve Hellman.
The law director did prepare 21-02-005, and I'd like to introduce that ordinance. It's the modify the speed limit on Mendon Road.
Okay, motion to introduce. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Second by Mr. Egler.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Mr. Ava?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
I believe that is all.
Yep. We'll read that once we get to the end. Any questions for streets and alleys? Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
And finally, property and equipment, Mr. Andrew Davis.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I've got a couple things this evening. First thing, I need the law director to prepare an ordinance allowing the sale of municipally owned personnel property which is not needed for public use on gov deals, and declaring an emergency.
Okay. Specifically, the items that Jay listed.
Well, there's two
Gov
separate.
deals first.
Gov deals, okay.
Do gov deals first, and then.
All right.
that's what we've got.
On an
Need to
emergency.
prepare.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Murgy. Please call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Ava?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
And second item, we have
That will go on
a
consent.
list of items that Safety Service Director talked about earlier that we want to go ahead and list on gov deals. I need the law director to go ahead and prepare that as well
On an emergency.
on an emergency.
Do I have a
Both
second?
emergency.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, he didn't say it for the second one.
Yeah,
Second by Mrs. Murgy?
Mr. Davis?
yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes. So both of those will be on the consent agenda next time.
And my last item for the evening, need the law director to prepare an ordinance to authorize the mayor to sign a deed transferring the 20 acres in Vision Park, and declaring an emergency.
Okay,
I'll second.
do I have a second? Second by Mr. Egler. Any questions? This is what Mrs. Adam was discussing early on. Okay, Drew?
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
The law director has prepared ordinance number 21-02-006. I would like to introduce that.
Second by Mr. Egler.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
And this ordinance has been prepared on an emergency, so I'd like to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend, second by Mr. Egler.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
And I would like to pass ordinance 21-02-006 on its first and final reading.
Second by Mr. Egler. Please read the ordinance and call the roll.
Ordinance number 21-02-006, an ordinance to authorize the mayor to sign a deed transferring approximately 20 acres in Vision Park to the Community Improvement Corporation of the City of Van Wert, Van Wert County, Ohio, CIC, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
And that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Davis? Thank you, Andrew. Unfinished business, we discussed code enforcement will stay there. Any new business to come before council this evening? We have no ordinances on the consent agenda, but we do have 21-02-005 for its first reading tonight.
Ordinance number 21-02-005, an ordinance modifying the speed limit on Minden Road. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
All right. Any other business to come before the council? this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
Does the one that Mr. Marshall had on there? is that the gas
Oh,
speed?
yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. I need you to ask that, what's the real number for that one?
009.
009 be
Yeah.
tabled.
Has to be, ask that that be tabled.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we don't have to vote on tabling, correct?
No, we don't.
It's just tabled, right? First and second? Okay, thank you for reminding me, Andrew. Now, motion to adjourn, Mr. Egg,
Yeah.
second by Mrs. Murgy.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mrs. Murgy?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Cowles?
Yes.
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Helmut?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good